Good afternoon, Facebook family. Today is my 33-year anniversary in recovery. That's 33 years of being drugged and alcohol free and trying to work some steps in a program. And I'm very proud of that. So, what I decided to do in honor of that is my next four videos, I decided to do a series on my life from the beginning to where I am today. And so, we're going to get started right now. I was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 1961. My real mother had me when she was 17 years old. As a result of this disease of addiction, which back then wasn't known as to be a disease in the early 60s, she died at the age of 19. I was 2 years old. I had a younger sister, 6 months old, and I had an older sister that was 4 years old. And our grandmother, which was her mother, decided to raise us on her own because our dads didn't want to be bothered. It felt like when our mom died, our dads died too, because they didn't want to have anything to do with that in terms of raising us and being responsible for us. So she wanted to make sure that we were kept together. So she took care of us and already had 5 children of her own, which I look back at today and say that was a hell of a woman to even be willing to do that. So she raised us as best she could, with my uncles and aunts, and we were in the same house together. So it was like we were brothers and sisters. And all these years later today, I still don't call my uncle my uncle. I call him by his first name. If I'm talking to somebody else about him, then I'll say my uncle. But I never called him my uncle because we've always been raised in the house together like we were brother and sisters. And I didn't know any different from that until I was 13 years old and I was told that our mother wasn't our real mother, she was our grandmother. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of who told me that and why they told me that. All I know that it was very confusing to me and my sisters because we had no idea. And the reason why we didn't have no idea is because she raised us the same way she raised her own kids. There was no different. There was no separation. There was no, these are my grandkids and these are my actual kids. She raised us just the same. And that's why we didn't know. Finding that out, we were very confused, like I said, and we went to her, and she was waiting for us to get a little older, and she was going to tell us herself. But it didn't change how we felt about her. It didn't change. We still viewed her as mom, and we viewed her as mom until 1981, at the age of 53 when she died. I was in the military when she got sick, and I was supposed to come home the next day, and that day before they said, we're going to get you on a plane because you might want to come home now because your mother is very, very sick. By the time I got home, I opened up the house door and all the family was sitting in there and everybody was looking down, and I knew that I was too late. And I knew that she tried to hold on for me. And I knew that this was going to be a very trying time for me because now that was my first feeling of really feeling that sense of loneliness. Being alone in the world, not just being alone, in a house, or I'm talking about, I felt the sense of loneliness without her. And as a result of me feeling that way and not processing my feelings like I needed to, and not getting the necessary support I needed, I turned to the streets. I turned to the streets, turned to the marijuana, turned to the beer, and all of those things, and knowing that I wanted to try to go back to school because I left school in 11th grade. And then after 11th grade, that's when I went into the military. So I wanted to go back, get my GED, and get those kind of things. But I started learning from the streets. Started learning how to hustle, learning how to, manipulate, learning how to, you know, get over, learning all of those things that come along with knowing the streets. And as a result of me learning all those things, I wanted to be a figure on the streets. So one of the things I needed to do to be a figure on the streets was be a part of what everybody was doing on the streets, which was selling marijuana, selling whatever else that they could sell, making profits, and those kind of things looked attractive to me. The guy with the 20 something years old with the nice car, pocket full of money, girls all around. I wanted that. And I wanted to get it how they got it. So what did I do? Because I didn't have the proper guidance in terms of male role models and male figures, I got my guidance from the males on the street. Because you're going to get a role model regardless of if it's a positive one or a negative one. You're going to get a role model. And I got the negative one. So I started doing what they were doing. I started selling drugs. I started running the streets. I started ripping and running in and out of the house all hours of the night. Now keep in mind, I had a stepdad who, after my grandmother died, was still living in the house. So I was doing all of this around him. When I say around him, I don't mean right in front of him. I mean behind his back. And he did his best to take care of me and my sisters. He really did. He didn't change up on me after our grandmother died like our dads did when our mother died. So I treated him with respect to a degree. I made sure he ate. I made sure that he was dressed. I made sure that he did, the things he had to do. I would go with him to his appointments and things like that. But when it came time for me to do the other thing, I was on top of that also. Now, he died in 1985, which left me and my youngest sister in the house. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. I was bringing women in there and having all kind of, weed parties and bagging up everything and doing all that stuff in there, at a young age. I was in my mid-20s then, but I still wanted to do the right thing. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to do the right thing because my environment that I lived around was centered around people doing the wrong things. Yeah, I'm sure there was a couple people back then that was doing the right things, but they were overshadowed by everybody that was doing the wrong thing. So that's what I decided to do. And not only did I decide to do it, I decided to teach my nephew, my young nephew, the streets. I decided to teach him how to do what I knew how to do. I decided to set him up on a corner. I decided to do that to a family member. And I still look back on that today. And I knew that that was something that I shouldn't have done. Because he was younger than me and he looked up to me and he wanted to be like his Uncle Trav. But I did that anyway. And I feel bad about that. Once we started doing what we were doing, things started spiraling out of control. And next thing we know, we were selling the white powder. And once we started selling the white powder, what happened to me was that I all of a sudden became my best customer. I was the one that was getting the most out of what I had, not the customers. I was, because I had became my best customer. And that's when my life started spiraling out of control. That's when I started losing everything. That's when I started getting put in positions where I didn't have a place to stay. You know, our house was foreclosed on. And the next thing I knew, I was in the streets with nowhere to go. Staying on sister's couch this night, next night the other sister's house, next night staying with a woman, next night just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's when I realized that this life that I was living comes with a cost, very serious cost, which is what we're going to talk about in the next series, because I'm going to leave a video up for part 2 of 4 series about my life. Thank you for watching today, and we will continue on the next video. Have a good day.